Lord Harkon might appear a cunning villain. He manipulates his own daughter and has a master plan to bring about a vampiric hegemony on the continent of Tamriel. But in actuality, Harkon is an idiot. From there being fundamental flaws in his plan to blot out the sun, to the dubious location of Clan Volkaher's secret castle lair, Harkon makes mistakes as a vampire lord that make one question his intelligence. The salient points about Harkon's plan to blot out the sun are these. In Skyrim, he wanted to use Auriel's bow, an immensely powerful artifact attributed to the god Akatosh, combined with the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour, meaning a pure-blood female vampire, to shoot the sun and bring about an eternal night. Now, anyone who has any basic general knowledge at all will know that almost all life on Earth depends on sunlight. So whilst Harkon might be overjoyed for the first few hours after his plan has been fulfilled, because he can waltz around outside with no hindrance, after Nirn's ecosystem starts to break down and humans and elves start to die in droves, I bet he won't be so pleased then. Vampires depend on mortal beings for survival. If elves and humans died because there was a lack of plants and subsequently a lack of animals, vampires would eventually die as well. So when Harkon claims that he's going to fulfill the prophecy for the betterment of vampire kind, he's either extremely short-sighted or stupid. Destroying a planet's ecosystem isn't good for any species' chances at survival. Let's say though that maybe Harkon manages to grow some sort of nocturnal vampiric plant or something, and he's able to keep a population of humans alive. It's still the case that 90% of the continent will be devoid of life and will be nothing more than a barren wasteland. So it's paradoxical that for someone so keen to be able to go outdoors indefinitely, he's willing to destroy nature to be willing to do so. Surely that sort of defeats the point. Moreover, it's not as if a Harkon never goes outside anyway. Skyrim is to the far north, so if the winters there are like how they are in somewhere such as Norway, then there will be barely any sunlight in the winter, allowing Harkon to potentially spend lots of time outdoors with no hindrance at all. But to be clear, I don't think Harkon's plan was to literally blot out the sun so he could go backpacking outdoors. No doubt he wanted there to be an eternal night so he and his minions could conquer the mortal peoples of Tamriel, something they otherwise can't do because they're limited to travelling and fighting at night. But again, there will be no one to conquer in the long term if there's no sunlight and all plants and wildlife die. And let's assume that the mortals do survive for a few years, or maybe even a decade without sunlight. How does Harkon plan to actually defeat them?
Harkon's vision is a world plunged in eternal darkness, where the vampire can flourish and never again fear the tyranny of the sun. What he fails to realize is how much attention would be called to our kind if the prophecy came to fruition. If eternal night fell, there are many who wouldn't stand for it. They would raise armies in attempts to return things to normal. The order of the day would be our destruction, until every last vampire was hunted down and eliminated.
Even divided among the Old Moe Dominion and the Empire, the peoples of Tamriel would massively outnumber the vampires, and organisations such as the Sigic Order would not stand idly by while the vampires attempted to conquer the continent. Plus, I'd imagine that the Empire and the Dominion would probably temporarily join sides, given that they're not at war at the moment and that the vampires pose a massive threat to both of their societies. Does Harkon seriously think that he and a band of maybe 1,000 vampires with maybe a few hundred thralls could seriously beat the hundreds of thousands of Imperial, Tholmor, Argonian and Dunmer soldiers? If we presume that Harkon's invasion began in Skyrim, Tullius's depleted legion combined with Ulfric's forces would no doubt outnumber them enough initially to do some serious damage to their cause. If the Stormcloaks and Imperials can call a truce for the sake of the dragon threat, no doubt they'd call one for the vampire threat as well, boosting their chances of success. Also, I doubt that Harkon would have the full support of the other vampires. Surely a smart thing to do would be to make sure the other vampire clans back him before he did anything. I mean, Serana and her mother are clearly against Harkon, and no doubt there are other vampire lords who would similarly be against him, because Harkon would invariably be pitting the vampires in an unwinnable war against the more numerous humans and elves. So clearly there are many flaws to Harkon's plan to blot out the sun. It's not as if there's a single good aspect to the plan, because even if you assume the best, that blotting out the sun doesn't kill the planet, then the sheer fact that the vampires are grossly outnumbered means Harkon's plan is effectively doomed to fail. Although some have theorised that Harkon planned to make an artificial sun. In the Clockwork City in Morrowind, Sothasil had an artificial sun, and some suspect that the Eye of Magnus was supposed to be the sun before Magnus abandoned the project to create Nirn. Both objects prove that it is sort of possible to make a sun, but Sothasil was a demigod when he created his sun, and the Eye of Magnus was made by a god. For Harkon to viably create an artificial sun friendly to vampires, it would require a lot of technical knowledge and a vast amount of power. These are two things that Harkon doesn't have. So to be honest, I think the idea that Harkon could make a substitute light source for the whole planet pretty unrealistic. In his capacity as leader of his vampire clan, Harkon also makes some questionable decisions. Particularly, there's the issue of the castle that he lives in. It's about 10 miles from the capital of Skyrim, and it's clearly visible from Northwatch, the fort controlled by the Thalmor, just across the water. For a clan of vampires who hate mortals and don't like confrontation, and who are also outnumbered, it seems questionable that Harkon would base himself a visible distance from the most densely populated city in Skyrim. Of course, it makes for easy pickings in terms of finding people to feast on, but at the same time, it would be highly likely that one day the city guards, or maybe the Legion, or some adventurers will discover the castle is full of vampires and raise the alarm. It's said that the commoners at the moment simply think that the castle's haunted with ghosts or that it's abandoned, but even so, why would Harkon base himself there deliberately? Because the chances of him being discovered is still more likely than if he was based in the middle of nowhere, and there's no way there are enough vampires in Castle Volkihar to necessitate being next to such a large concentration of humans. Additionally, an element of Harkon's stupidity seems to stem from his arrogance. I mean, he doesn't even think twice before fighting the Dragonborn at the end of the quest line, even if the Dragonborn willingly gives him Auriel's bow. Anyone with half a brain would realise it would be best to shoot the sun first and fight later. But no, Harkon believed he could quickly and easily beat the Dragonborn and his own daughter before taking the time to fulfill his prophecy. Such was his arrogance. His actions are made even worse if by the time of the fight the Dragonborn has defeated Alduin and Miraak. Harkon is certainly not more powerful than the dragon responsible for ending the world, or the first Dragonborn. So what on earth makes him think he can beat a fully fledged last Dragonborn? There's also the question of why he would attack the Dragonborn at all as well if the Dragonborn willingly gives him the bow. I get that Harkon is power mad, but the Dragonborn could also make a powerful ally. To sum Harkon up, he acts like an extremely powerful demigod with a cunning master plan, but in actuality he's a somewhat strong, but not strong enough, vampire lord with a plan that would mean the destruction of the world in the long term, including the destruction of his own people due to the deaths of all mortal beings. For a being that's thousands of years old, Harkon is, surprisingly, idiotic. Thank you for watching this video. I've made a playlist of all the other Skyrim NPCs I've analysed, such as Astrid, Delphine, Ancano and others, so please feel free to check that out if you feel like it. Also, if you want to see more Elder Scrolls lore, then feel free to subscribe. I've also started streaming again, and I put up announcements for that on the community page on my channel, so please do keep an eye out for that. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.